Dear friends, we are pleased to welcome you to our channel. Today, we will discuss one of the profound topics that touches the hearts of millions of believers around the world. What were the last words spoken by Pope John Paul II before his death? These words left a significant mark in history and in the spiritual life of the Catholic Church. We will talk about his spiritual legacy, his life, and, of course, the moment when he, barely able to speak, turned to God with a request that you will learn about in this video. Additionally, the text of the prayer will be presented at the end of the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It's very important for me to reach 1,000 subscribers, and I would be very grateful for your support. Now, let's get to know the Pope. Pope John Paul II played a historical role as a spiritual leader and shepherd, leaving an indelible mark in the history of the Catholic Church. His papacy, 1978 to 2005, lasted nearly 27 years, making him one of the longest-serving popes in history, as well as the most influential. He became a symbol of change and resilience in Catholicism, continuing the line of previous popes while also introducing his own innovations. In times when the Church faced the challenges of modern changes, Pope John Paul II became a steadfast bastion of Catholic faith and tradition while also addressing the needs of the contemporary world. His election in 1978 also marked an important historical moment. He was the first non-Italian pope in over 400 years, bringing renewal to the Church and attracting attention not only from Catholics but from the entire world. His Polish nationality and deep connections to Eastern Europe made him a symbol of hope for countries undergoing political changes, especially Poland and the countries of the Soviet bloc. John Paul II became not only a spiritual leader but also a symbol of spiritual renewal for the entire Catholic community. He sought to renew the Church by implementing numerous reforms aimed at strengthening the role of the laity in church life and adapting Catholicism to the challenges of modernity. One of the most notable examples of this was his involvement in the preparation and conduct of the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, which laid the groundwork for reforms in the Church, including improving relations with other Christian denominations, Jews, and Muslims. In his sermons, the Pope often emphasized the importance of spiritual renewal, mercy, and love, seeking to inspire believers towards personal holiness and active participation in church life. He was a proponent of the idea of new evangelization, which focused on the need for missionary work, spiritual renewal, and strengthening prayer, a significant theme of his papacy. Pope John Paul II also had a profound influence on the worldview of believers and the Church's relations with the modern world. In his numerous encyclicals and messages, the Pope not only preached Christian values but also actively responded to the challenges facing Catholics in various corners of the world. He called for moral renewal, condemning abortion, euthanasia, violence, injustice, and material vices. His teachings addressed both personal and social aspects of life. Pope John Paul II raised important issues related to social justice, human rights, and the protection of the dignity of every person. His messages on peace and social responsibility gained particular importance during years marked by global conflicts, such as the Cold War and crises in the Third World. His involvement in the fight for human rights, freedom, and democracy, especially in Eastern Europe, particularly Poland, played a decisive role in the fall of communism. The Pope actively supported dialogue between religions and cultures, which is particularly relevant in a world where conflicts based on religion are becoming increasingly frequent. An important moment was his historical address to Jews, Muslims, and other denominations, in which he expressed a desire to build bridges between cultures, strengthening peace and understanding. Furthermore, Pope John Paul II had a strong influence on how the Church is perceived by modern society. He actively preached among young people, calling them to responsibility, fidelity to Christian values, and the fight for human dignity. His many meetings with youth during World Youth Days became landmark events, inspiring millions of young people to deep spiritual reflection and active participation in church life. Thus, John Paul II not only became a symbol of renewal for the Catholic Church but also had a tremendous impact on the spiritual worldview of believers, becoming a living example of Christian faith, love, and service to humanity. Pope John Paul II was not only a spiritual leader but also a powerful political player on the international stage. His influence in global politics is impossible to overestimate, especially in the context of his fight for human rights, democracy, and freedom. The Pope became a vivid and powerful opponent of totalitarian regimes, particularly communism, and actively advocated for the protection of dignity and human rights worldwide. His Christian stance, rooted in the teaching of humanity as the image of God, formed the basis for his political activity. His influence was particularly significant in Eastern Europe, where he became a moral authority and a source of support for those suffering under the Iron Curtain. His role in supporting the struggle against communist regimes in Poland and other countries was crucial. A major symbol of this was his active support for the Polish Solidarity movement in the early 1980s. Meetings with opposition leaders and calls for peace and human rights became catalysts that inspired people to fight for freedom. Many historians believe that his moral support played a key role in the fall of the communist bloc in Eastern Europe and the beginning of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. John Paul II also actively spoke out against racial and ethnic discrimination, calling for respect for human rights and humanism in international politics. He condemned phenomena such as apartheid in South Africa, advocated for peaceful conflict resolution, and urged states to respect the rights of minorities. One of the hallmarks of John Paul II's papacy was his numerous international visits. During his papacy, he visited over 100 countries, which became a symbol of his commitment to convey a message of peace, love, and tolerance to all peoples and cultures. His visits were not mere ceremonies but true acts of spiritual and political influence. The Pope sought to meet with people of different faiths, cultures, and traditions to build bridges between different peoples and preach the principles of peaceful coexistence. One of the most famous and significant visits was his trip to Poland in 1979, which became a moment of national awakening and the beginning of resistance against the communist regime. Pope John Paul II became not only a religious leader but also a catalyst for political change in Poland and other Eastern European countries. During his visits worldwide, the Pope consistently raised issues of peace, mutual understanding, and respect for others, regardless of their race, religion, or social status. His visits to Muslim countries, such as Turkey, Syria, Morocco, as well as to Israel, where he visited holy sites for Christians, Muslims, and Jews, underscored his commitment to the idea of interreligious dialogue and the pursuit of peace and tolerance. The Pope repeatedly stated that religious diversity should not be a cause for conflict, but rather a reason for respect and cooperation. Undoubtedly, one of Pope John Paul II's most significant achievements was his role in the fall of the communist regime in Eastern Europe. From the very beginning of his papacy, the Pope actively supported the aspirations of the peoples of these countries for freedom and democracy. He became a symbol of the struggle against oppression and authoritarianism, especially in the context of his actions in Poland, his homeland. His visit to Poland in 1979 was a turning point in the fight against communist dictatorship. Inspired by his words about freedom and human dignity, Polish believers began to organize mass protests, leading to the emergence of the Solidarity movement, the largest independent trade union, which later played a key role in the fall of Polish communism. This event influenced other countries in the Eastern Bloc and served as one of the factors that accelerated the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Pope also actively used his authority to motivate both Western and Eastern governments towards dialogue and peaceful resolution of conflicts, including those in the Balkans and other parts of the world. His support for human rights and democratic changes in these countries not only bolstered the morale of the opposition but also gave hope to those fighting for freedom. John Paul II was also an important mediator in diplomatic relations between countries and cultural differences. His participation in negotiations and speeches at international forums helped resolve conflicts and exert pressure on governments that violated human rights. the influence of Pope John Paul II on global politics was unprecedented. His moral authority and profound Christian convictions became a powerful tool in the struggle for freedom, peace, and democracy, and his visits around the world made him one of the most recognized and respected leaders on the international stage. On May 13, 1981, the world was shocked by the news of the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. During his public audience in St. Peter's Square at the Vatican, Turkish terrorist Mehmet Ali Agca opened fire with a pistol, wounding the pontiff in the abdomen and arm. The Pope was urgently rushed to the hospital, where doctors struggled to save his life. Several operations were performed, and the Pope survived several critical hours, which became a true miracle. The uncertainty and seriousness of the consequences of this attack shook the entire Catholic world, and many believers prayed for his health. However, in this difficult moment, the Pope demonstrated remarkable resilience. Not only did he survive, but he continued to fulfill his duties despite the serious physical limitations resulting from his injuries. The assassination attempt did not lead to hatred or revenge for the Pope, but rather became a significant moment of spiritual reflection and strengthening of his faith. John Paul II used this experience as an opportunity for deeper contemplation of his role and responsibility. Confronted with the threat of death, he more resolutely continued his service to the people, seeing his survival as a manifestation of divine will. A few years later, in 1983, Pope John Paul II made the decision to meet with the man who tried to kill him, Mehmet Ali Agca. This meeting became a turning point in the Pope's personal story and a poignant act of Christian forgiveness and mercy. The Pope met Agca in the prison where the latter was serving his sentence for the assassination attempt. This gesture of forgiveness stunned the world. John Paul II not only conversed with the terrorist but also expressed genuine forgiveness for his actions. "I came to forgive you," he said during the meeting. The Pope also inquired about Agca's health and wished him the best in the future. This meeting became a symbol of faith in the power of forgiveness and divine mercy. This act of John Paul II was not merely a gesture of kindness but a profound religious truth that he conveyed. Forgiveness is not a weakness. Instead, it is the strongest form of love that opens hearts and changes the world. The Pope demonstrated that a true Christian must forgive even those who bring pain and suffering. This was a living example of how faith can overcome malice and hatred. Pope John Paul II, more than anyone else, showed that Christian mercy is not limited to words but is expressed through actions. His forgiveness of the terrorist became a symbol of the Christian faith's teaching to forgive, even when it seems impossible. It was also a testament to his humility, as he believed that he, as a human being, could not rise above the values he preached. Forgiveness, love, humility, these qualities were part of his Christian journey in service. It is no coincidence that after this assassination attempt, the Pope became even closer to believers. His example inspired millions of people around the world toward reconciliation and overcoming enmity. He taught that loving even one's enemies is the highest act of Christian virtue that brings peace and harmony to the world. John Paul II became a living example for the entire Church and for every Christian. His life, filled with trials and personal tragedies but also with forgiveness, was a clear affirmation that faith based on love and mercy is capable of overcoming any difficulties and bringing true freedom and peace. In the 1990s, the health of Pope John Paul II began to rapidly decline. A new struggle emerged in his life, against progressive diseases, among which was Parkinson's disease, significantly altering his way of life. The diagnosis was made in 2001, but symptoms had begun to manifest earlier, with difficulties in movement and expression of emotions. Despite this, the Pope continued to perform his duties with unparalleled fortitude and determination, refusing to let physical weakness halt his ministry. Doctors recommended that the Pope limit his public appearances. However, he continued to fulfill his responsibilities, travel, and conduct vital events. His battle with illness became an important example for believers around the world, showing how one can maintain spiritual strength and a desire to serve even in the most challenging conditions. His resilience in the face of illness inspired millions of people, helping them cope with their own life challenges. In the final months of his life, Pope John Paul II was almost entirely restricted in his movements. He found himself in the hospital, where his condition deteriorated day by day. Yet, even in moments of physical weakness, the Pope continued to pray, and his prayers became an essential part of his life and spiritual farewell. He asked his loved ones and closest associates to pray for him, and in his last moments, he repeated the words of prayer, emphasizing that he was placing his complete trust in the Lord. In the final days of his life, the Pope expressed his readiness to meet God. During this time, he uttered his last words, which remained in the hearts of believers: "Let me go to the house of the Father." These words were not merely a plea but an act of total devotion and spiritual readiness, reflecting his deep faith and ideal of humility. The Pope was fully aware that his time had come, and with peace in his heart, he accepted the inevitable. In those last moments of his life, the world witnessed a profound spiritual lesson that he left for the faithful. He demonstrated how crucial faith, humility, and the willingness to accept what pleases God in peace are. His spiritual farewell became not just an act of concluding his life but also an inspiration for millions of people to whom he dedicated his life. The death of Pope John Paul II on April 2, 2005, left a void that will be hard to fill. However, his legacy continues to live on. The influence of the Pope on the Catholic Church and the world is impossible to overestimate. His lessons on love, forgiveness, and spiritual courage continue to inspire people all over the globe. His work in the spiritual realm, active efforts to improve relations between different religions, battles for human rights, assistance to the poor, and the pursuit of peace, all of these ideas remain an integral part of his legacy. He actively contributed to the renewal of the Catholic Church, overcoming many traditional barriers and calling for open and honest dialogue with the world around. He paid particular attention to youth, regularly meeting with them and motivating them to take actions rooted in love and service. Furthermore, the Pope left incredibly important spiritual messages that impacted global Christian thought. His visits to countries experiencing social and political crises made significant contributions to the processes of reconciliation and understanding among nations. He actively supported ecumenism, fostering the restoration of ties between various Christian denominations and overcoming historical animosities. The legacy of John Paul II lives not only in his works and documents but also in every person who was inspired by his example. His words, actions, and aspirations remain alive in the spiritual memory of Christians worldwide, and the continuation of his work and teachings became his true spiritual farewell. The full text of the prayer is as follows: Lord, you have called me to yourself, you have led me along this path of life. I have followed you in joy and in suffering, in victories and in defeats. Now, at this moment, I ask one thing of you: open the doors of your house, O God, and allow me to enter into your dwellings. I gratefully accept your will, and I pray that with each step I have taken on earth, I draw closer to you. I am not afraid, for you are my shepherd, and in you I have found all that I sought: light, love, faith. May my soul find rest in you, may all my suffering come to an end in your blessing. I forgive all those who have caused me pain, and I ask forgiveness from those whom I have caused suffering. May your mercy cleanse my soul and lead me to you, into the abode of your peace and love. Allow me to go to the house of the Father, where there is no pain or fear, only joy in you. I believe that you will greet me with love, as you greet all your children, and in your hands, I will find eternal peace. Amen.